Imagine an army marching through the scorching summer heat of ancient Mesopotamia. Thousands of soldiers, sweating under heavy armor, push through dust and sand. But at the center of this exhausted column, guarded by elite soldiers, travels something almost miraculous. Covered in heavy blankets of felt and straw are massive blocks of snow, carried hundreds of miles from distant mountain peaks. It was brought not to save lives, but to cool the wine and sweet fruit syrup of a king. For nearly 3,000 years, eating something frozen in the heat of summer was a display of absolute, terrifying power. It meant you commanded armies. It meant you had thousands of subjects willing to risk frostbite in winter mountain pits. And it meant you possessed secrets that ordinary people could be executed for trying to discover. Hello, my friend. Welcome back to Origin Stories. Today, I want to tell you the story of ice cream, a frozen luxury that moved from secret royal palaces to street corners, transforming from an ancient symbol of tyranny into one of the simplest pleasures on earth. Long before freezers existed, ancient civilizations treated ice not as weather, but as gold. In ancient China and Rome, survival in winter was difficult enough, but emperors demanded that winter be preserved for the summer. Thousands of enslaved laborers and peasants were forced into freezing mountains during the coldest months of the year. They chopped massive blocks of ice from frozen lakes and hauled snow in wicker baskets down steep cliffs. Up to 90% of the ice melted during the long, hot journey back to the city. But the small portion that survived was stored in massive underground pits, sealed with straw and mud, waiting for the emperor's feast. To serve a bowl of sweetened snow in July was to tell your guests that you controlled time, seasons, and nature itself. But this snow was not yet ice cream. It was coarse, icy, and melted in minutes. To transform frozen water into a smooth, thick delicacy, cooks needed to invent something that seemed scientifically impossible. They needed a way to make ice colder than freezing. The secret was discovered in the Arab world and brought to Renaissance Italy. It was an astonishing chemical reaction hidden inside an ordinary ingredient, salt. When you add salt to ice, it forces the ice to melt. But as the ice melts, it absorbs heat from everything around it. This process drops the temperature of the surrounding liquid far below the normal freezing point of water. For the first time in human history, cooks did not just have to harvest ice. They could use ice to freeze other liquids. They poured rich sweet milk, fruit juices, and thick cream into metal bowls, placed those bowls inside wooden buckets filled with salted ice, and began to stir. The salt pulled the heat directly out of the cream, turning liquid into a smooth, velvety frozen paste. It was a moment of true culinary magic, but like all powerful magic in the early modern world, the powerful wanted to keep it entirely for themselves. During the Renaissance, the wealthy Italian city-states turned frozen cream into an art form. Architects and stage designers like Bernardo Buontalenti were hired by wealthy families like the Medicis to design extravagant royal banquets. Buontalenti did not just serve frozen desserts. He created elaborate theatrical sculptures made of flavored ice, scented with bergamot, lemons, and orange blossoms. When Catherine de' Medici moved to France to marry the future king, legends say her Italian chefs brought these secret recipes with them, sparking a craze for frozen dainties among European royalty. The obsession reached its peak in 17th century England. King Charles I was so captivated by the rich, frozen cream served at his table that he made his French chef, de Marco, an astounding offer. The king granted him a massive annual pension, worth a small fortune, on one strict condition: the chef must keep the recipe for ice cream an absolute royal secret. It was never to be written down, and it was never to be served to anyone outside the king's personal household. The king wanted a monopoly on coldness. For decades, frozen cream remained locked behind palace doors. But kings cannot control secrets forever. When political revolutions tore through Europe and royal power began to crack, the secrets of the palace kitchen spilled into the streets. In 1686, a Sicilian waiter named Francesco Procopio opened a small establishment in Paris called Café Procope. It was unlike any place Europe had ever seen. Instead of dark, quiet taverns, Café Procope featured large mirrors, crystal chandeliers, and marble tables. And on those tables, Procopio served gentle scoops of milk, sugar, fruit, and ice to public patrons. For the price of a small coffee or sweet, ordinary wealthy citizens could sit where philosophers like Voltaire and Rousseau debated new ideas, all while eating a delicacy that had once been reserved only for monarchs. The democratization of frozen cream had begun. It was no longer a royal secret, but it was still an expensive luxury. Crossing the Atlantic Ocean to America, however, would turn this delicacy into a national obsession. In the late 18th century, the founding fathers of the United States became utterly obsessed with ice cream. George Washington loved it so much that during the scorching summer of 1790, his personal accounting ledgers show he spent over $200 on ice cream, a staggering sum at the time, equivalent to thousands of dollars today. Thomas Jefferson was equally captivated. While serving as an American diplomat in Paris, he carefully studied how French chefs prepared the dessert. When he returned to Virginia, he brought back a brass ice cream mold and wrote down a detailed, step-by-step recipe for vanilla ice cream. That handwritten recipe, preserved today in the Library of Congress, helped popularize vanilla across the young nation, but preparing it in the hot Virginia summer required immense labor. The delicate process of churning cream over salted ice fell to enslaved cooks, including Jefferson's brilliant chef, James Hemings, who mastered the intricate chemistry required to keep the dessert smooth. Despite its growing popularity among the elite, making ice cream at home remained an exhausting, multi-hour ordeal. A cook had to stand over a wooden bucket, constantly scraping ice from the sides of a metal bowl with a spatula while turning it by hand for hours. Everything changed in 1843 because of an American woman named Nancy Johnson. Frustrated by the tedious process, Johnson invented a simple yet revolutionary machine, the hand-cranked ice cream freezer. Her design used an outer wooden tub for the salted ice and an inner metal cylinder fitted with a central paddle attached to a hand crank. When you turned the crank, the inner paddle scraped the freezing cream from the metal walls while simultaneously churning air into the mixture. Johnson's simple invention reduced the churning time from hours to minutes. It produced smoother, creamier ice cream than anyone had ever tasted. Astonishingly, Johnson sold her patent for just $200, but her core mechanical design was so perfect that it remains the basic engineering logic behind churned ice cream to this day. With production suddenly made easy, ice cream exploded out of wealthy estates and flooded the streets of rapidly growing industrial cities. But this rapid expansion brought a dark, unexpected catastrophe. In Victorian London and New York, street vendors known as hokey-pokey men began selling cheap ice cream to working-class children. To keep costs as low as possible, vendors served a small scoop of frozen cream inside a small, thick glass cup called a penny lick. A child would pay 1 penny, lick the frozen sweet clean out of the glass, and hand the cup back to the vendor. The vendor would briefly wipe the glass with a dirty rag, submerge it in a bucket of stagnant water, and immediately fill it for the next customer. In crowded, unhygienic cities, the penny lick became a rolling biological disaster. The unwashed glass cups acted as dangerous vectors for disease, spreading tuberculosis, cholera, and diphtheria from child to child. Hundreds of children fell sick, and medical authorities realized that the public's favorite new treat had become a major health hazard. Cities began banning the penny lick entirely. Ice cream needed a safe, clean, and edible holder, or its golden age would end before it truly began. The answer arrived in 1904 at the St. Louis World's Fair during a blistering hot summer. The fairgrounds were crowded with thousands of visitors looking for relief. An ice cream vendor named Arnold Fornacho was selling scoops so fast that he completely ran out of glass bowls and paper cups. Long lines of frustrated customers were about to walk away. Directly next to his stand was a Syrian immigrant named Ernest Hamwi, who was selling a traditional Middle Eastern crisp, waffle-like pastry called zalabia. Hamwi's hot pastry stand was struggling in the summer heat while his neighbor was overwhelmed. Seeing his neighbor's crisis, Hamwi pulled a hot, thin waffle off his press, rolled it into a tight cone while it was still soft, and let it cool into a crisp, rigid shape. He handed it to the ice cream vendor, who placed a scoop of ice cream directly on top. The combination was instant magic. The cold cream softened the warm, sweet waffle, and the customer could eat the entire container without leaving a trace of waste or disease behind. The waffle cone had solved the sanitation crisis of the penny lick overnight, creating one of the most iconic culinary pairings in human history. If you are enjoying this deep dive into history and want to improve your English while learning incredible stories, make sure to subscribe to Origin Stories. We share hidden chapters of history every week. Now, back to our story. By the mid-20th century, ice cream had transformed from a health hazard into a powerful symbol of comfort, freedom, and home. During World War II, the United States government recognized that morale was just as vital as ammunition for soldiers fighting far across the globe. The U.S. military became so convinced of ice cream's psychological power that the Department of Agriculture rationing system ensured military bases had massive supplies of dairy. In 1945, the U.S. Navy undertook an extraordinary project. They spent over $1 million, a huge sum at the time, to convert a giant concrete barge into a floating, fully functional ice cream factory in the Pacific Ocean. This floating parlor could produce over 10 gallons of fresh ice cream every 8 seconds, delivering cold vanilla and chocolate scoops to sailors on battleships in the middle of tropical combat zones. Japanese commanders reportedly realized the staggering industrial capacity of the United States when they learned that America had entire ships dedicated solely to delivering frozen cream to its troops. When those soldiers returned home after the war, they stepped into a suburban boom powered by a new home appliance, the modern domestic refrigerator with a built-in freezer compartment. For the first time in human history, ice cream did not need to be eaten immediately after churning, nor did it require a trip to a parlor. You could buy a large paper tub at a local supermarket, carry it home, and store it in your kitchen for weeks. To meet this massive new commercial demand, food corporations altered the traditional recipes. They introduced chemical stabilizers to prolong shelf life and used industrial pumps to inject large amounts of compressed air, a process known in the dairy industry as overrun, into the cream. By doubling the volume of the tub with cheap air, mass-market ice cream became light, airy, and inexpensive, but it lost the dense, rich quality that had captivated kings and emperors for centuries. The industry had achieved total democratization, but in doing so, it had standardized flavor and texture into cheap, uniform products. By the late 1970s, people began searching for the lost richness of traditional ice cream. In 1978, two former hippies, Ben Cohen and Jerry Greenfield, took a $5 correspondence course on ice cream making from Pennsylvania State University. They renovated an abandoned gas station in Burlington, Vermont, and opened an ice cream shop. Ben suffered from a severe sensory condition called anosmia, meaning he had almost no sense of smell and could barely taste flavors. To enjoy his own ice cream, he relied almost entirely on physical texture and feeling in his mouth. Ben insisted that their ice cream be extraordinarily rich and thick, but more importantly, he demanded it be packed with massive, tangible chunks of cookies, candy, fruit, and nuts. That personal physical limitation birthed Ben and Jerry's signature style, proving to a global market that consumers were willing to pay a premium for dense, high-fat, heavily textured ice cream made with simple ingredients. They sparked a modern artisanal craft revolution that continues to grow today. Today, you can walk into almost any corner store or supermarket on Earth, open a glass freezer door, and pull out a tub of frozen cream for a couple of dollars. We eat it without a second thought, while walking down the street, sitting on a couch, or celebrating a birthday. Yet every single scoop holds the echo of 3,000 years of human ingenuity and struggle. It contains the brutal winter labor of ancient ice harvesters, the secret chemical discoveries of Renaissance alchemists, the royal decrees of paranoid kings, and the simple cleverness of ordinary inventors who refused to accept that coldness belonged only to the rich. The next time you enjoy a simple ice cream cone on a hot summer day, take a moment to look at it. You are holding a frozen miracle that ancient emperors fought to possess, and that human civilization spent thousands of years bringing directly to you. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the past. I always enjoy exploring these remarkable stories together. Now I'd love to hear from you. Which part of today's story surprised you the most or changed the way you think about history? Let me know in the comments. I read as many of them as I can. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe for more fascinating stories from history. There are countless forgotten lives, incredible events, and ancient mysteries still waiting to be uncovered. Until next time, take care of yourself, stay curious, and never stop exploring the past. I'll see you in the next story.